Welcome to Junior Achievement. My name is Risa, and on behalf of JA, we'd like to welcome you to the classroom. Today we are going to be looking at the JA Global Marketplace Middle School Curriculum. For today's activity, Session 1, you need the following materials: the student workbooks, the X marks the spot stickers, the bookmarks, the take-home newsletters, the CD-ROMs, the table tents where students can write their names on it and put it on their desk so that you can get to know their names, as well as the guides for volunteers and teachers. What you'll notice as you open your volunteer guide is that the opening pages are greetings from JA USA. On page 11, you will see a master list of materials which will help you provide a checklist to ensure you have all the materials you need for today's activities. The first activity is called X marks the spot. And this activity is going to challenge the students to think about the importance of imports and exports on our lives. What you'll notice is that when you start on page 14, it talks a little bit about your introduction. And in the introduction, they want you to share a little bit about yourself as you build a rapport with the students, as this is the first time you're in the classroom. Then you're going to cover vocabulary such as trade, market, domestic trade, and international trade. They also encourage you to share a little bit about if you've ever traveled abroad to other countries or if any of the students have. One great thing to help the students understand the difference between domestic trade and international trade is to talk a little bit about domestic animals. I always talk about how a domestic animal is like a kitty cat. It's something that can be inside your home, whereas a wild cat would be something like a lion that you wouldn't have in your home. So domestic trade is trade within your home country, and international trade is trade with across the borders of countries. Then you're going to talk a little bit about imports and exports. And a way I help the students understand the difference is that I write on the board the word import equals into, export equals exit. And that way you can underline the IM and the IN, and then the EX and the EX to show imports is into and export is exit. That's a great way to help the students learn those two words. The actual activity for today's event is for the students to go on a scavenger hunt. So before I start, one thing I like to do is I like to ask the students to think about how many countries are going to be represented in their classroom. So on the board I write a little graph that says, you know, how many of you guys think we're going to be able to find 1 to 3 countries? How many 4 to 8, 9 to 13? Or 14 to 19, and then 20 plus. Ask the students to vote for which category they think that they're going to find. Then what you want to do is have the students split into small groups, and you can ask your classroom teacher for help with that. It works really well if you have the students get into 6 small groups. Then what they're going to do is they are going to use their student workbook to explore the room as a scavenger hunt to find as many items as they can find and then their corresponding country. So for example, if they find a highlighter that was made in China, they would write highlighter China. Then, once they get about 5 minutes to explore the classroom, depends upon how much time you have in the classroom, the students can come back together in their small groups, and what you want to do is call the students up individually, go from group to group to group, and have them share one of their imported items. So the first group could come up and say that they found a highlighter imported from China, and then they're going to go ahead and put an X marks the spot sticker on the appropriate country on the wall map. So eventually you're going to see a lot of different stickers all over the map to see how many countries are represented. I always like to ensure that the students don't use the same country twice, and to instead make sure that they use one that has not already been chosen. One great thing to help expedite the process of finding the country on the map is that the very centerfold page of their workbook is a map that matches this page. So, found on page 10 and 11 of their student workbook, they can locate it first on their page, and then that way when they come up to the front of the room, it won't take as much time for them to find the country. I also encourage other people and friends to help find countries, or even soliciting the help from the teacher if you're not familiar with where the country is located. So So after you have the students share as many countries as they could find, what you can do is just go back to that initial graph on the board that kind of showed our prediction of how many countries were represented. In a typical classroom, in about a 5-minute exploration, you typically find around 15 different countries. So I always like to challenge the students to think about, what if we had been able to explore for a half an hour? Or what if we had been able to explore the entire school instead of just this classroom? Really getting the students to think about how impactful other countries are on the items that we use every single day. The second portion of this activity is an adaptation activity, thinking about products around the world. So what you would do is then have the students, again in their small groups, work on page 2 of the student workbook. What the students are going to be doing is to consider how products are adapted to fit the needs of individual countries. So for example, with cars, what are the differences of cars in America versus Japan or other countries? What you'll notice is on your guidebook on the bottom of page 15, there is an answer key in the margin. You or the students might think of additional ideas, but this is a great starting place. So for example, cars, the size of cars are different, the fuel used is different, the placing of the steering wheel is different, things such as that. So that is the second portion of the activity, and depending upon how much time you have, you can go in depth on these different adaptations, or you can abbreviate and just highlight a few of the key items. You want to ensure that you spend just the last few minutes to do a summary and review, and that is found on the top of page 16. And what you can notice is that there is a quick check in the student's workbook on the bottom of page 2 that allows them to just kind of think and reflect upon what they've learned today. There's also the opportunity to send home the students a CD-ROM that they can use at their convenience in their own homes or in a friend's house if they don't have their own personal computer, as well as a take-home newsletter that they can share with their parents. You might want to check with your classroom teacher, because oftentimes teachers will assign extra credit if the students are able to actually complete the crossword puzzle that is found on here. Or, as the volunteer, you could also challenge the students to complete this, and if they are to return it completed the next time you come in, maybe you'll give them a special piece of candy or a treat. It's totally up to you, but you might want to check with your classroom teacher on what would work best for you. Enjoy session 1!